coding is a lot like being a chef. Having all the highest quality ingredients doesn't matter if you don't know the right sequence and timing to create your delicious masterpiece. And unfortunately, coding has a lot more ingredients than even the most complex Michelin star recipe, which means that unless you know exactly what you're doing, you're a lot more likely to make your computer explode than to make a functioning program. But fear not, because I have analyzed the coding habits of the most successful programmers in this world, and I've distilled this information into 5 powerful coding hacks. And chances are, if you're still not able to write code fluently, it's probably because you're not doing at least one of these things. And luckily, most of these are not actually hard. You just have to sort of get it in a way. And the most powerful one of all of these that I discovered literally only requires you to master using one button on your computer. Okay, so here's how this is gonna work. For each of these hacks, I'm gonna tell you the story of 2 programmers. First, we have Thomas, a struggling, average Hello World programmer who's still coding like a complete noob. And then we have Hal the hacker, a nerd tinkerer who builds multi-millionaire apps during the day and hacks into the Chinese intelligence system during the night. So needless to say that to do all of these things, he has to not only know how to code, but to do so efficiently, which brings us directly into powerful coding hack number 1. The thing is, in 2023, manual coding is kinda dead. But Thomas has still not realized it. He still thinks that he has to write every single line of code by hand, and he might as well literally be using Microsoft Word to code because of how little he's actually utilizing the different tools we have available to us as programmers. It's as if he's trying to make a steak by first building a farm and raising cows himself for years before finally butchering them and actually then frying them into an actual steak, rather than literally just going to the supermarket and buying some steak. This leads him to be so inefficient with coding that it's no wonder that it takes him 2 weeks to build a simple to-do app that uses nothing but basic HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Hal the hacker laughs at people like Thomas. Ha ha ha! He's mastered his code editor of choice and optimized his workflow to efficiently take advantage of advanced features such as automatic code refactoring, version control integration, and automatic code completion using tools like GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT. So he's basically automated almost all manual code generation at this point, which allows him to focus on higher level things like architectural design questions and things like this, which allows him to literally get exponential results compared to Hello World programmer dumbasses like Thomas, who's still stuck writing boilerplate HTML by hand. What a retard. And this Thomas guy is definitely not like me from the past or anything like that. Like, I've definitely never done any of these things. Yeah, that's a lie. But that's not even the worst thing that he's doing, sadly. Which brings us to hack number 2. So Thomas, our Hello World programmer, often finds himself getting stuck, wondering why his code isn't working. He lacks a clear understanding of what's actually happening inside of his program, which leads him to not progress as a programmer. On the other hand, Hal the hacker is a master of efficiency. That's because he's discovered a secret weapon that provides invaluable insights, helping him to identify bugs and trace his code's execution every step of the way. Now, can you guess what Hal the hacker's secret weapon is? It's a technique that's so simple, yet most beginners completely ignore it. It's the humble print statement. So what Hal the hacker's strategy is that he uses print statements at every stage of his program to understand all the values of his variable and to see which if blocks are running and things like this, which allows him to actually find these bugs and these errors much faster. And that is how you iteratively find solutions to these errors. Whereas Thomas just gets stuck staring at massive error codes without even having any idea where to start. But let's be honest, all of these strategies only really work if you actually manage to apply them in a way that's going to get you a job in the real world as a software engineer. And I know from personal experiences that a lot of times, and one of the most helpful things, can be having access to actual one-on-one mentorship and support to build your career, which is exactly what you can find with today's sponsor, Springboard. Springboard is an online learning and career platform that provides a comprehensive curriculum covering everything you need to go from zero to software engineer as
fast as possible. Their award-winning curriculum is 100% online, part-time and project-based. It contains 800 hours of content developed by Cold Steel, and most importantly for me personally, it includes one-on-one mentorship and career coaching with a completely unmatched job guarantee, where basically if you don't get a job within a certain amount of time, they'll basically just refund you all of the tuition. It's pretty crazy. So if you are looking to take control of your career and build a highly marketable and valuable skill set to your resume, you can go to this link right here and use the code TUOMASK, that's TUOMASK, for a full $1,000 off the course. Thank you for Springboard for sponsoring the video, and now let's move on to the next strategy.
And this brings us to probably Thomas's biggest mistake. He has completely the wrong strategy when it comes to learning to code. Look, I get it, coding can be hard, and it can take a lot of time to work through and understand what a large code base is doing. And this is where Thomas struggles probably the most. Whenever he needs to build something even slightly more complex, he gets stuck in the details and he doesn't really even know where to start. But Hal the hacker doesn't have this issue because he has discovered hack number 3, which is the power of diagrams. Here's what I mean by this. Every time Hal starts up a new project, he doesn't dive into the code straight away. He first takes up literally like a whiteboard or even just like pen and paper to sketch out the high-level architecture of his application. He thinks about things like, what is the most logical place to start? Do I need a server? Which database system should I use? This applies even if you're just learning a framework like Django. You should first seek to understand the flow, the general flow of how Django works, because when you do that, Django goes from just being this obscure collection of folders into an actual logical flow that makes sense. And the way you understand that in the best way is literally just to draw up a diagram and like try to understand it at high level before you go down into the details. This is what Hal the hacker does every time he learns something new, whereas Thomas, which is still definitely not like what I used to do, he just dives into the code straight away without even understanding what he's doing, which leads to a lot of problems down the line.
But I don't know how these different technologies work. I don't know which one I should use. I don't know how APIs work. Blah, 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 blah.
Well, no shit, you don't know it if you've never learned it before. That is why, as a programmer, your most important skill is being resourceful, having the ability to literally go on Google and look these things up to try to understand them yourself in a way that makes sense for you.
Okay, got it. So in the next app, I'm going to use React in the front end, and I'm going to connect it to Firestore. Then I'm going to connect it to GraphQL and AWS and Google Cloud and Netlify.
That's exactly the next mistake that you're making, which brings us to hack number 4. Let's take a step back and look at coding as like being a chef. To make a great meal, you do need a lot of different ingredients. Yes, trying to make an impressive coding project from just index.html and app.js is like being the chef at a dinner party and only serving a plain potato as an entire meal. But this doesn't mean that the more ingredients you add, the better the meal is gonna be. That literally just leads to your programs becoming like over-processed, calorie-filled pieces of junk. The key in being a great chef is choosing the right ingredients for the job, not more and not less. In the same way, if you're trying to just make a simple e-commerce project, there's no reason to start over-processing it with things like Docker and Kubernetes and like all this fancy new technology when you don't actually need to have them.
Okay, so I think I'm just gonna stick to basic HTML and CSS and JavaScript then.
So the hacks that we've discussed so far are incredibly important, but they pale in comparison to this last trick that we're now about to talk about. And literally, if all you do is this one thing that I'm about to tell you, you will make progress. Like, it sounds so stupidly simple, but most people mess this up. The problem that Thomas has is that he's too afraid to run his code. He's scared of error code. Yeah, I know, they can look scary, right? But guess what? Your computer is not gonna explode if you make an error code. Well, unless you're writing C. Don't write C, write Python. But the way you actually learn anything is by literally just making mistakes. Because whenever you make a mistake, there's some lesson in there. If you're riding a bike and you fall, there's probably something that you learn about how you were riding it that you shouldn't be doing anymore. Same way with programming. When you make an error and you read the error code and you finally, after 2 hours, you understand it, after that, you know how to not make that mistake the next time. So to literally just learn to code so much faster, you need to be pressing enter more times than you are now. Let me explain. The rate at which you just press enter to run your code as many times as possible is literally the rate at which you're gonna learn, because it's gonna be the rate at which you make mistakes that you then learn from. This is how I actually code when I'm coding programs. I will put something together, and rather than just like looking at every line to like make sure like, oh, is this definitely correct, I just run the code, and then I know pretty much for a fact that there's gonna be some error code. A lot of the time it's something stupidly simple, like I forgot to change some type of some variable, but I'd rather just run the code and then see what the error was and then just go fix it, rather than try to obsess over every line before I run my code. But the key to doing all of this is consistency. If you cannot get yourself to sit down and implement these hacks every day, nothing will happen. And many people struggle with this. But in my own journey, I actually figured out a very simple system to fix this problem of consistency. And ever since I started using it, I just got the ability to suddenly, consistently code every single day, even when I don't want to. So if you actually want to make these hacks successful, you also need to master the skill of consistency. So to learn that, go watch this video next.